Welcome to Let's Talk Red Hill, your source for the latest updates and insights on the Navy's progress at the Red Hill Bulk Fuel Storage Facility. This podcast is dedicated to keeping you informed, addressing your concerns, and sharing progress straight from the experts leading the way.
Hello, I'm Rear Admiral Mark Williams, and welcome to this special replay episode of our Navy Closure Task Force Red Hill podcast. Today's episode takes a closer look at our environmental remediation efforts that are critical to ensuring the safety and reliability of our water resources. While this episode originally aired some time ago, the information it shares and the dedication it reflects remain as relevant today as when we first aired the episode. As we continue to advance our work, we remain steadfast in our commitment to protecting the health and well-being of our service members and their families by providing safe, reliable drinking water. We are actively engaged in a variety of initiatives, from restoring our two inactive drinking water source wells, the Red Hill and Navy Lava shafts, to making key repairs and improvements to our water storage tanks and pipelines throughout the Joint Base Pearl Harbor-Hickam distribution system. Please stay tuned for the full episode.
Hello everyone, I'm Rear Admiral Mark Williams, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Red Hill. Today we have a special guest joining us, Commander Benjamin Dunn, the Navy Closure Task Force Officer in charge of environmental remediation and monitoring efforts. Ben, thanks for joining us. Why don't you tell the audience a little about yourself?
Awesome. Aloha, sir. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm originally from Aiea, Hawaii. I attended St. Elizabeth School, graduated from Marino High School. I joined the Navy late in college, been around serving in places like California and Guam, Poland, Pearl Harbor, and then back to Pearl Harbor here before joining the Closure Task Force.
Awesome. So the Closure Task Force has several lines of efforts that are focused on tank cleaning and facility decommissioning. Your line of effort and your team's effort is a little different. It's focused on the monitoring and remediation of the environment. Tell us a little more about that.
Certainly. The department's function for environment and remediation is to help restore public trust in the Navy and confidence in the Joint Base Pearl Harbor-Hickam's water distribution system, as well as the long-term environmental cleanup at Red Hill. We also support efforts with the recovery of the Navy Aiea Lava shaft and the Red Hill shaft, and demonstrate good stewardship of our natural resources.
So you mentioned, the drinking water monitoring here, and then also restoring trust and confidence in the Joint Base's drinking water system. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Absolutely. First, I'd like to point out that we've been sourcing drinking water for the Joint Base system from one source since the November release, and that's the Waiava well, which is located over 6 miles from Red Hill. And as part of the extended drinking water monitoring program, we have collected a tremendous amount of samples, and we regularly test our drinking water source, the Waiava well, across the distribution system, residences, schools, daycare centers, and some other facilities on a regular basis. And all of these results are available publicly on the Safe Waters drinking water website.
Okay, so you highlighted the fact that we are currently sourced from a single location, and that is of concern. What efforts are we undertaking from a resiliency, redundancy, and security standpoint?
Great question, sir. So we have multiple efforts that we're pursuing to improve the condition of the Joint Base system. We have two inactive drinking water sources that we are planning to reactivate, and that includes the Navy Aiea Lava shaft and the Red Hill shaft as supplemental drinking water sources. We are making repairs and improvements to pipeline and water storage tanks for the system, as well as other efforts related to valve exercising and flushing to ensure proper operations and maintenance of the system.
All right, so let's shift away from drinking water a little bit and talk about our groundwater monitoring efforts, which is really centered around finding if there is contamination and then detecting if contamination is going to migrate away from Red Hill. What's the status of those efforts?
Certainly. So we've been conducting environmental monitoring for Red Hill for a decade now. We started installing groundwater monitoring wells in and around the facility back in 2015. And commenced groundwater sampling and monitoring since that point. We've also began at that time developing a groundwater flow model to estimate and characterize groundwater conditions and potential flow in the facility and around. the data that we've collected over the past 3 years for groundwater monitoring has shown no evidence of any contaminant migration leaving the Red Hill site. We continue to drill additional monitoring wells, and we continue to revise our groundwater sampling and monitoring program in close coordination with the regulators to make sure we are optimally managing and monitoring conditions on site as well as off site. Most specifically, we continue to drill wells around so that we can detect any movement from the site.
Okay, so one of the things that sets your team's efforts apart on environmental monitoring remediation from our other lines of effort, obviously, is the timeline. So how long will monitoring and remediation efforts last?
So our long-term remediation, a reason why we call it long-term is because we measure that in a matter of decades, vice years. There's, as I mentioned, we've been at the groundwater monitoring effort for a decade now. We continue to revise our sampling procedures and sampling frequency, but we have a project that's called a site assessment, and it's a very lengthy, deliberate process that's closely coordinated with the regulators, and that involves investigation of and assessment of the site to characterize the extent of contamination. And so, as we look at historical records, and then we go on site and confirm presence of where we think contamination from the November 21 release and possibly other releases are. It's an effort that we want to make sure we get right, but it takes time and it's an iterative process. And then we look at the technologies that can be used on site. And so while we are working through that process, we're going to take every opportunity that we have to explore some of those technologies in the meantime. That's where some of the pilots that we have, such as the soil vapor extraction pilot and the natural source zone depletion study, to evaluate what natural biodegradation would be occurring at site.
So Ben, thanks so much for joining us and for all the information today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on the show, sir.
Thank you for listening to this important discussion on our environmental remediation efforts. Since this episode was first aired, our extended drinking water monitoring efforts were completed, and final reporting of those results are being submitted to the EPA and the Department of Health later this month. We are committed to maintaining the highest standards of water safety. For any drinking water concerns you may have, you can contact our Water Quality Action Team by calling 808-210-6968. Navy Closure Task Force Red Hill will continue to keep you informed with press releases as well as updates on our website and our mobile app and with future podcast episodes. Thank you for your continued support and partnership as we move forward.
Mahalo for listening to Let's Talk Red Hill. Stay tuned for our next episode and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date. Be sure to download the mobile app by searching NCTF Red Hill in the Apple Store or Google Play.